Hello, I'm Dr. John Pellitteri, President and co-founder of the International Society for Emotional Intelligence. I'm also a professor in the School of Education at Queens College in the City University of New York. And I'm very pleased to have been invited to present on emotional intelligence and school leadership for the special conference in Slovakia this month. In my presentation now, I'll be talking about three different things. First, the definition of emotional intelligence. Then I'll look at some selected research studies on EI and leadership. And finally, I will look at leadership styles and the emotional dynamics that occur in 6 different styles. Now, there are different types of emotional intelligence, different models. I think one of the most useful models is the abilities model of emotional intelligence that was developed by Jack Mayer and Peter Salovey in the United States. And a brief definition that encompasses this model is that emotional intelligence is a set of abilities for using emotional information in adaptive ways. And here I've highlighted 3 key words: abilities, information, and adaptive. So when we look at emotional intelligence as a set of abilities, we're distinguishing it from emotional intelligence when it's conceptualized as a set of traits. The idea of emotional information, I think, is a very useful and unique aspect of the abilities model. Emotions provide us information about our internal states and about the internal states of others. And with that, it also provides information about the needs and the motivations that go with those emotions. So emotions as information is extremely important, especially in a school environment when we want to consider the school climate. So we need information about what are the emotional states of all the students in a classroom, for example, or what is the emotional state of all the teachers, the morale of the staff. Emotions provide important and valuable information. And to be emotionally intelligent means that you're working towards some adaptive way. You're adapting or adjusting your own emotions or others' emotions to move towards productive pro-social goals. So we're using a set of abilities for emotional information in adaptive ways. Now, Mayer and Salovey outlined several types of abilities, several groups of abilities. I'd like to focus on 2 main abilities that seem to be present in almost every model. One is recognition of emotions, the other is the regulation of emotions. Now, recognition refers to perceiving emotions, that is, perceiving in ourselves and in others. And regulation refers to managing the emotions that we experience in ourselves and the emotions in others. Now, Dan Goleman has a different model of emotional intelligence. It doesn't include all of the Mayer and Salovey ability sets, but it does have these 2 central abilities, this idea of emotional recognition and emotional regulation as applied to the self and to others. So recognizing emotions in the self is sometimes referred to as self-awareness. Recognizing emotions in others in this model is referred to as social awareness, also empathy. In the bottom row of this table, regulating emotions in the self is about self-management and self-control. And regulating emotions in others is about relationship management. Now, Goleman's model is sometimes referred to as a mixed model because he blends social intelligence and competencies and personality factors as well, but it is very applicable to work in organizations. And I think the simplicity of it, recognition and regulation in the self and others, is a nice way to encompass at least the major abilities that we need to use. Now, in regard to research on emotional intelligence and leadership, several studies have found a connection between emotional intelligence and transformational leadership, and emotional intelligence and effective leadership. So it's been studied extensively, and this is just an example of some of the studies that found these correspondences. Mills in 2009 conducted a meta-analysis, including 48 studies on EI and leadership. And Mills found moderately strong effect for EI and effective leadership. And this is based on 48 studies. So this is very important, that it establishes a grounding that EI does predict and facilitate effective leadership. Mills goes further to talk about how EI needs to be included in educational leadership programs. That's also an important thing to consider. Now, so many of the studies are done on leaders in organizations, but schools in particular have a certain focus. So this is important research that is a foundation for what we need to do in the ed leadership process. Now, another study in 2011 organized leadership behaviors into two groups, and they named them getting along and then getting ahead. So getting along is being a team player, being a good citizen of the organization, empowering others, being collaborative. It's really about relationships. And any good leader, whether in education or in a corporate organization, needs to focus on leadership, on relationships. Relationships are the key. And emotional intelligence allows us to develop positive and productive relationships. That's the getting along task of a leader. And there's many capacities and roles built into that. The second category was getting ahead. So being directive, being inspirational, importantly, accomplishing goals, getting things done, communicating, implementing vision, managing the tasks and the processes of reaching a goal. So the getting ahead tends to be very goal-oriented and task-oriented. And a good leader is able to manage both. Now, a large study in this area had 929 managers, and they found that emotional intelligence had a significant effect on collaborative behaviors, that is, the getting along behaviors. And with that, once you were able to get along with the workers, then EI and getting along was able to facilitate getting ahead behaviors. So it's an interesting, a simple but very powerful formula. Work on getting along and use your EI skills to make good relationships with your workers. And then from there, you could more easily inspire and motivate people to get ahead and accomplish the tasks of the school. So I want to look now at 6 different leadership styles that were proposed by Goldman. Okay, the directive style, in a sum, is do what I tell you to do. It's very authoritarian. Visionary is here's where we're going. Affiliative is leadership through relationships. Participative is a democratic style. Let's decide together. Pace setting is I'm running fast, try to keep up with me. And finally, coaching is working on the long-term development of others. Now, these 6 styles came from a study that involved almost 4,000 people in the study. And it was from that sample that they were able to determine these 6 leadership styles. And 2 of the styles are considered dissonant creating. This is the directive and the pace setting styles. So what we mean by dissonant creating is that they create dissonance or tension between the leader and the workers. And the other 4 styles, visionary, affiliative, participative, and coaching, they're considered resonant styles. They create more resonance, more harmony, more collaboration. And all of these styles have an effect on the emotional climate of the organization. So I'm going to go through all 6 styles and look at the emotional dynamics of these and consider how they could be getting along as a focus or getting ahead as a focus, and how emotional intelligence can help us to facilitate all 6 of these styles. It's important to remember, however, that each style can be beneficial and also can be problematic at different times. And a good leader is able to use several styles. They're not just rigidly locked into only one way of leading. And that, again, is an emotional intelligence capacity to be flexible, to adjust, to adapt your style of leading based on what's needed. So the first of the 6 styles is a dissonant style, the directive style, also known to as commanding or authoritarian. And the theme is the person is demanding compliance. So while it is a getting ahead style, it has a lot of problems with it. It can, however, be beneficial in a crisis. If the leader is competent and is taking charge in a crisis, do this, take care of that, we must get this done, That's important, and that's a case where that style might actually be very effective. And the emotions it could create in the workers is confidence and hope. Outside of a crisis, however, the authoritarian style generally is very dissonant and problematic. People could feel resistant, feel distrust or disrespected, or disrespect the leader. They could feel powerless, they could feel dependent. Most people don't want to be commanded in that way. So often that's a problematic kind of style. The second style is also dissonance creating, the pace-setting style. While the leader focuses on high standards, there's an attitude of do it my way. We're doing it this way, follow along, keep up. It's not including the workers, it's not engaging the workers. Now again, that might be beneficial if workers are very independent and don't need a lot of direction, and if they share the same values as the leader. If they want to run as fast as you, they'll keep up with you. In many cases, however, people will not be able to keep up with how the leader is operating, and it's generally problematic. People may not feel appreciated, they could feel very anxious, they could develop resentment, they could feel excluded. So the pace-setting style, again, typically can create a lot of dissonance. And along with the authoritarian style, they're the two styles you generally want to try to avoid, unless you're in certain circumstances. Now, the next four styles are the resident creating styles. So a visionary leader is one who inspires other people, who works towards transformation, who sets a goal on a bigger purpose, larger than the self, larger than the group, a large purpose, an important goal, overarching goal. Those leaders bring in self-confidence, but they also bring in empathy towards other people. Key factor in emotional intelligence, empathy. And they will engage others in long-term change. A visionary leader inspires, creates hope, creates optimism, and it would probably require a lot of emotional intelligence to be able to do that. Unlike the pace setting, the visionary leader has a goal but includes people. And again, while it is a gain ahead behavior, it's also a gain along as well. It really blends those two. It can be problematic if the leader is not credible and people don't have faith in the leader. They can end up feeling anxious or discouraged. The second resident creating style is affiliative. It's relationships, working together. It's the essence of that. Now, often an affiliative style combined with the visionary style can be a really great combination. In the affiliative style, you want to create harmony, and the message is put people first, people before tasks. It's clearly a getting along kind of style. It could create people's well-being, cohesive relationships in the group. If there's stress or conflict in the group, it could repair some of those conflicts. It creates an environment with safety, with trust and harmony. It's generally a good way to lead. However, it can be problematic because sometimes the organization needs direction, the workers need corrective feedback, and you need to be able to reach goals. You can't just focus exclusively on making people feel good. That's a common misconception about emotional intelligence. It's not simply about feeling good all the time. Things have to get done. And so an affiliative style can be problematic that it can create frustration and inadequacy when goals are not met. So it needs to be used in a balanced way. The third style is participative. It's a democratic style. It's building commitment and consensus. It's working in a collaborative way. And that again is a very effective style. The good leader engages people, it listens to them, and helps people to feel involved. Everyone has an opinion, everyone has a voice. Those voices are heard. Those opinions are valued. And even if you don't go with the workers' opinions, the fact that you ask for their opinion and value their input, that gives a positive message. So people with this kind of leadership, the environment that's created tends to be appreciated, valued, trusted. However, this can also be problematic, again, when there needs to be a decisive action. And sometimes there's too much work on everyone's opinion, everyone's vote, everyone's input, and things don't get done. It could be frustrating sometimes. It can take an excessive amount of time to get something done. So that's the downside of the participative style. Finally, the coaching style. is one where the leader works to help all the workers develop. Long term, you want to focus on identifying strengths and limitations with the goal of helping people improve and be better than they are at their job. And that's also a very supportive style. In the long term, it can have a really good effect that everyone's working towards being better and improving. And the feelings that can come up in that kind of leadership is feeling supported, feeling encouraged, feeling motivated. Those are positive feelings that you want to have in the school environment. However, it can sometimes be problematic when short-term results are necessary. It's not always the time to work on developing the person. You need to get certain things done. And some workers don't want to develop. It's not important to them. So they could find this kind of leadership style frustrating. But again, to reiterate, a good leader is flexible and can use 2 or 3 or more of these styles at different times. And that's probably the most effective. When you can match the right style to the right situation, then you have a good combination. So to review, the emotional intelligence in leadership, we want to recognize and regulate ourselves. So we want to recognize our own emotions, but also with that, what are the needs and goals that we have connected to our emotions? That's self-awareness. A good leader is self-aware. Along with that, a good leader has emotional management. You're able to match your emotions to the current situation. You're able to regulate your emotions. Sometimes you need to be a little tough to set a boundary, to assert an important message, to get something done. Other times you can be more flexible and a little softer and more nurturing. A good leader could regulate your emotions to match the individual worker and the situation. And the other half of this is recognizing how others feel. How does your leadership style create feelings in others? The 6 styles we just went through looked at all the different emotional reactions. So it's important to recognize, how are other people feeling, not just from your leadership, but feeling in their own roles, feeling how they are in the organization, how they are in a particular situation. How are they feeling? Empathy is critical to emotional intelligence. When you have empathy, you understand as a leader how the workers feel. And that information is extremely valuable for helping you to intervene. And what can you do to regulate others' emotions? There are several strategies you can use that could modify and transform the way other people feel and help to match their emotions to the particular demands of the situation. So skillful, emotionally intelligent leaders are able to do this, know themselves and know others, and to operate accordingly to move towards those goals. One thing to consider is how the leader has a connection and relationship to all the workers, all the people they supervise, and that the workers themselves have a connection. And this creates what we call a psychological space. Kurt Lewin, a Gestalt psychologist, came up with this idea. And we need to consider all the factors. How are all the emotions involved? How are people's personality styles come into play? How are needs being factored into this? What are people's individual motivations? They all come into play into affecting the psychological space and the emotional climate. A good leader can work within that psychological space and operate. I published a book many years ago called Emotionally Intelligent School Counseling. And one of the things we emphasize in the book is this idea of a psychological space. One of the metaphors was considering the school environment like a weather system. There are clouds, there's rain, there's temperature changes, there's sunshine, there's some storms. The weather system is constantly changing, constantly in flux, constantly in a dynamic movement. And you, as an emotionally intelligent leader, can be in the middle of the storm or in the middle of the system and operating and directing things. Sometimes you need to be a solid, strong rock in the middle of a crisis so people can cling to you and feel safe and secure and have the confidence that you're going to lead that ship through the storm. So considering the emotional environment as this dynamic system is a helpful way to think about the school system. And also to think about being an emotional center. Anyone in the school can choose to take on these roles. You don't have to be the formal administrator of the school, You could be a school psychologist or a counselor or a teacher. And you could take on leadership roles, even in an informal way. And by being the emotional center of a school, you're making a commitment to work with and towards emotional intelligence. You can choose to be self-aware. You can choose to be empathic and attuned to other people. You could choose to manage emotions in a healthy, productive way. You could choose to express emotions and be a model of good emotional expression and emotional management. And in doing that, you can create an energy in that school system, in that environment of the school building. You can create an energy and be that emotional center where other people are drawn to you by how you operate with emotional intelligence. And the second point here is to develop the positive relationships. That's the key. Getting along with others is a foundation. You also need to consider getting ahead, but the relationships are the foundation for that work. And emotional intelligence allows you to develop healthy and positive relationships with others. And finally, consider the dynamics, the psychological space of the school environment. This is important, and this is a more dynamic, ecological way of considering the whole environment that you want to impact. Your leadership, whether formal or informal, will create an emotional climate. And you have power to influence that through emotional intelligence skills. So I'd like to say thank you very much, and I look forward to the panel presentation at the end of May.